The dinner party was supposed to be like all the others. Another evening of pretending to laugh at Andrew's jokes while his colleagues and friends dominated the conversation. I had my routine perfected: smile politely, refill drinks when needed, and stay quietly in the background as my husband held court. 7 years of marriage had taught me my place in these gatherings, but I never expected what happened next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cabernet hit my face before I even registered Andrew's arm movement. The cold shock of wine dripping down my cheeks, soaking into my cream blouse as the entire table fell silent. "You idiot!" Andrew's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and deliberate. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, amused. It wasn't the first time he'd humiliated me. But something about the wine dripping down my face as his friends awkwardly watched, some giggling, others averting their eyes, told me it would be the last. Thursday had started like any ordinary day. I woke up early, prepared Andrew's coffee, exactly as he liked it: 1 sugar, splash of cream, and laid out his charcoal suit for the Henderson client meeting. He barely acknowledged me as he rushed through breakfast, checking emails on his phone while I stood by the counter, waiting to see if he needed anything else. "Don't forget, we have dinner at the Richardsons' tonight," he said without looking up. "Be ready by 7. My heart sank. I'd been looking forward to my Thursday evening alone all week, the one night Andrew played racquetball with colleagues. These rare evenings of solitude in our spacious colonial-style home were precious. I would curl up with books Andrew dismissed as airport novels, enjoy takeout from restaurants he deemed beneath us, and briefly pretend I was living the life I'd once imagined for myself. "I thought you had racquetball tonight," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. Andrew glanced up, his expression hardening slightly. "Victor just made partner at the firm. The Richardsons invited us to celebrate. We have to go." Not a request, a statement of fact. Another evening of performative smiles and carefully measured words. "I was looking forward to some time alone," I said, instantly regretting my honesty. Andrew's expression shifted, that familiar mixture of disappointment and contempt. "Seriously, Eliza, this is important. Victor's wife will be disappointed if you're not there." He didn't say what we both knew. Victor's wife, Melissa, barely acknowledged my existence at these gatherings. She and the other wives formed a tight circle of designer clothes and vacation home comparisons that never quite expanded to include me. "Of course," I conceded, as I always did. "I'll wear the navy dress." "The burgundy one," Andrew corrected, already turning away. "It makes you look more put together." I nodded, swallowing the reminder that my opinions, even about my own appearance, were secondary. The burgundy dress had been Andrew's choice, like so many things in our life together. The day dragged on with the looming dinner party casting a shadow over every hour. I taught my morning literature class at the community college, smiling through discussions of Jane Austen while mentally rehearsing the appropriate small talk for Andrew's colleagues. During my lunch break, I refreshed my makeup and straightened my hair. Andrew preferred it straight rather than its natural wave. By the time I arrived home, anxiety had settled in my stomach like a stone. I laid out the burgundy dress, the nude heels Andrew approved of, and the simple pearl necklace that was my grandmother's, the only piece of jewelry I wore that hadn't been selected by him. I showered, taking extra time to ensure every detail was perfect. One less thing for Andrew to criticize. He arrived home at 6:30, immediately disapproving of the earrings I'd chosen. "The silver ones," he said, frowning at my reflection in the mirror. "Those pearls look dated with that dress." I silently changed them, watching his reflection for the subtle nod that meant I'd gotten it right. The Richardson home was exactly what I expected: imposing, impeccably decorated, and cold. Melissa greeted us at the door, air-kissing Andrew before giving me a quick once-over. "Eliza, That dress is bold, she said, the pause communicating everything her words didn't. I managed a tight smile as we moved into their expansive living room. The usual crowd was already there, 4 other couples from Andrew's firm, all positioned in their usual hierarchy. The senior partners and their wives commanded the best seats while junior associates like Victor hovered nearby, eager to be included. Andrew immediately gravitated toward Thomas, the managing partner, leaving me standing awkwardly at the edge of the room. I'd been through this routine so many times I had it memorized. Andrew would forget my existence for the next hour, then eventually notice me and make a show of bringing me a drink, playing the attentive husband for exactly 3 minutes before being pulled into another important conversation. Melissa approached with a glass of white wine, pressing it into my hand. "You looked like you needed this," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you," I replied, taking a small sip. It was too sweet, but I knew better than to mention it. "The men are discussing the Henderson merger," she explained, as if I wouldn't understand even if I were included. "We're gathering in the kitchen to finalize dinner." By we, she meant the wives, our designated territory, while the men discussed matters of actual importance. I followed her into the kitchen where the conversation revolved around private schools and seasonal home decor. I contributed occasionally, careful not to say anything too opinionated or revealing. Dinner was served at 8, a perfectly orchestrated affair with assigned seating. Andrew was positioned near Thomas, while I was relegated to the far end between Victor and Michael, a junior associate known for his uncomfortable stares. The conversation flowed around me: market trends, office politics, vacation properties, topics where my input wasn't expected or desired. I smiled at appropriate moments, laughed when others laughed, and kept my wine glass half full, exactly as Andrew preferred. "Nothing worse than a wife who drinks too much at these things," he'd told me after our first firm dinner years ago. Was picking at my salmon when I heard my name. Andrew was telling a story about me. And then Eliza, brilliant as she is, his voice dripping with sarcasm, decided to try fixing the disposal herself. Flooded the entire kitchen before I got home. The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't true. The plumber had caused the flood while Andrew was on a business trip, but he'd twisted the story to make me the punchline. "It wasn't actually," I began, but Andrew continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Had to replace the hardwood. $15,000 because someone thought watching YouTube tutorials made her a plumber." More laughter. I felt my cheeks burning. "Andrew, it was actually the plumber. Who—" "Honey," he cut in, his voice sharp despite his smile. "Don't ruin a good story with facts." Another round of chuckles. I fell silent, staring at my plate. The conversation moved on, but Andrew wasn't finished with me. Every 20 minutes or so, he'd reference another of my supposed failures. The time I'd gotten us lost in Boston, I hadn't. The client I'd supposedly embarrassed him in front of, I'd never met the man. The promotion I'd missed at the university library where I worked, a position I'd never applied for. Each story painted me as incompetent, scattered, and slightly dim. Andrew's burden to bear with good-natured patience. With each anecdote, I shrank further into myself, becoming exactly what he described. When dessert arrived, a complicated chocolate torte I was certain Melissa had purchased rather than made, I excused myself to the restroom. I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. When had I become this person? This shadow who existed only in relation to her husband? I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to ruin my makeup. Andrew would notice if I returned looking unkempt. I reapplied my lipstick with a slightly trembling hand and took 3 deep breaths before returning to the dining room. As I approached the table, I could hear Andrew's voice rising above the others. My steps slowed as I realized he was telling another story about me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The publisher actually called me to ask if Eliza's manuscript was some kind of joke. My blood went cold. My unfinished novel. The one I'd been working on secretly for 2 years, pouring my heart into during those precious Thursday evenings alone. The manuscript I kept hidden in a password-protected file that Andrew must have found and read without my knowledge. Something inside me shifted as I took my seat. A small crack appeared in the careful facade I'd maintained for years. "That's not true," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, but clear enough to be heard. Andrew paused mid-sentence, surprise flickering across his face before settling into a familiar, condescending smile. "Sweetheart, don't interrupt. I'm just telling them about your little hobby." "It's not a hobby," I replied, my hands gripping my napkin under the table. "And no publisher called you." The table fell quiet. I could feel everyone watching us, the tension suddenly thick in the air. Andrew's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Eliza, you're embarrassing yourself," he said, his voice dangerously soft. I should have stopped there. That's what I always did. Backed down, apologized, retreated into safe silence. But the thought of him reading my manuscript, mocking my private dreams, something I'd protected so carefully from his criticism. It was too much. "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "You're embarrassing me. You've been doing it all night with these made-up stories." Andrew's jaw tightened. I could see the warning signs, the slight flush creeping up his neck, the way his fingers gripped his wine glass. "Actually," I continued, each word feeling like stepping onto thin ice, "you've been doing it for years." Thomas coughed uncomfortably. Melissa began collecting dessert plates with exaggerated focus. Victor and his wife exchanged glances. Andrew leaned forward slightly. "I think you've had enough wine," he said, his voice carrying just enough concern to sound reasonable to everyone else, but I recognized the threat beneath. "I've had half a glass," I replied, "and I'm not done speaking." The silence around the table grew heavier. I could feel the wives' discomfort, the men's embarrassment at witnessing a colleague losing control of his spouse. 7 years, I said, my voice gaining strength. 7 years of stories like these. 7 years of you making me the joke. Andrew's expression shifted from warning to fury in an instant. His arm moved, not with rage, but with deliberate control, and suddenly my face was wet, cold, shocking. Red wine dripped down my cheeks, soaking into my cream blouse beneath the burgundy dress he'd insisted I wear. "You idiot," he snapped, his voice echoing in the silent dining room. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. I sat perfectly still, feeling the wine run down my neck, staining everything it touched. Then came the reactions. Melissa's gasp, Thomas's uncomfortable throat clearing, Victor's wife reaching for extra napkins. But what struck me most was the laughter, nervous, uncomfortable chuckles from a few of the men as if this were just another amusing incident, and Andrew's face, not embarrassed, not apologetic. His expression held something closer to satisfaction, as if he'd finally put me in my place after my momentary defiance. I reached for my napkin, slowly wiping my face. The expensive fabric came away stained red, like evidence of something violent. My hands weren't shaking. I felt strangely calm as I stood up. "Thank you for dinner, Melissa," I said, my voice steadier than I would have expected. "I should go." Andrew's smile faltered slightly, confusion replacing his satisfaction. This wasn't how our script usually played out. I was supposed to be humiliated, tearful, apologetic for causing a scene. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Don't make this worse." I looked at him, really looked at him, taking in every detail of his handsome face, the face I'd woken up to for 7 years. the face that had once made my heart race with love and now only tightened my chest with anxiety. "I'm going home," I said simply. Before he could respond, I turned and walked toward the door. I could hear him making excuses behind me. "She gets emotional when she drinks. Sorry about this. Women, right?" But I didn't stop. Outside, the cool night air hit my wine-soaked skin. I hadn't brought my purse to the table, which meant I had no phone, no keys. I walked to our car but couldn't get in. For a moment, I stood on the Richardsons' perfect driveway, feeling lost. Then I started walking. I didn't have a clear destination, just away from the house, away from the dinner party, away from Andrew. The neighborhood was upscale and quiet, streetlights casting long shadows as I made my way down the sidewalk, burgundy dress and wine-stained blouse darkening in the night. I walked for nearly 20 minutes before I heard the car behind me. I knew it was Andrew without turning around. The BMW pulled alongside me, window rolling down. "Get in the car, Eliza," he said, his voice controlled again, reasonable. "You're being ridiculous." I kept walking. "Eliza," his tone sharpened. "I said get in the car, now." I stopped then, turning to face him. "No." I kept walking. "Eliza," his tone sharpened. "I said get in the car, now." I stopped then, turning to face him. "No." The word hung between us, simple yet seismic. Andrew's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief. In 7 years of marriage, I had never directly refused him like this. "You're making a scene," he hissed, glancing around the upscale neighborhood, as if concerned someone might witness this fracture in our perfect image. "Get in the car before someone sees you like this." I looked down at myself, wine staining my cream blouse, splattered across the burgundy dress he'd chosen. The physical evidence of what had just happened. Maybe that's precisely why I needed to stay visible. "Let them see," I said quietly. Andrew's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me." "No, Andrew, you embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of your colleagues. You threw wine in my face." His jaw tightened. "You provoked me." By speaking the truth? By contradicting me at an important dinner. He was using his reasonable voice now, the one that made me doubt my own perceptions. "You know how these events work. We discuss it afterwards if you have concerns, not during." For a moment, I almost wavered. This was our pattern. Andrew would explain why my feelings were inappropriate, ill-timed, or exaggerated, and I would accept his interpretation of reality. It would be so easy to slip back into that comfortable, familiar dynamic. "Get in the car, Eliza. We'll talk about this at home." Home. The word echoed strangely in my mind. Our house hadn't felt like home in years. It was a showcase of Andrew's success, a stage for his carefully orchestrated life where I played my supporting role. "I need some time," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Time for what? To walk around looking like that?" He gestured at my wine-stained clothes. "Don't be childish." "I'm not being childish," I said. "I'm finally being honest. With myself." Andrew's expression hardened. "Fine, have your little moment. I'm going back to apologize to everyone for your behavior. Call me when you're ready to be rational." Before I could respond, he rolled up the window and accelerated away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk. I watched his taillights disappear around a corner, waiting for the panic to set in, but it didn't come. Instead, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. My cheeks still felt sticky from the wine. My blouse clung uncomfortably to my skin, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress, the one feature I'd insisted on when Andrew selected it, and pulled out my emergency credit card. The one Andrew didn't know about, linked to the account I'd maintained from before our marriage. It didn't have much on it, but it would be enough for what I needed right now. I pulled out my phone and ordered a rideshare, grateful that Andrew hadn't thought to remove my app access yet. While waiting, I wiped at my face with a tissue from my pocket, the white fabric coming away stained red. Like evidence, the car arrived within minutes, the driver glancing uncertainly at my disheveled appearance. "Rough night?" he asked as I slid into the back seat. "You could say that," I replied, surprising myself with a small, genuine laugh. It felt foreign in my throat after years of careful, measured responses. "Where to?" he asked. I hesitated. "Not home. Not yet." I needed space to think, to process what had happened and what it meant. I needed somewhere Andrew wouldn't immediately look for me. "The Parkview Hotel, please," I said finally. A mid-range business hotel downtown, nice enough to be safe, but not somewhere Andrew would think to check. We'd never stayed there. It wasn't prestigious enough for his taste. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the manicured lawns and imposing homes of Andrew's carefully cultivated world recede behind me. For the first time in years, I was making a decision entirely for myself. The wine was drying on my skin now, turning tacky and uncomfortable, but I didn't mind. It was physical proof of what had happened, what I could no longer deny or minimize or explain away. The drive to the Parkview Hotel passed in a blur of streetlights and silence. I stared out the window, watching as we left the manicured suburban neighborhoods behind and entered the more vibrant downtown area. The driver, sensing my mood, had stopped attempting conversation after a few polite efforts. My phone buzzed. Andrew. I silenced it without reading the message. It buzzed again almost immediately. Then again. 3 text messages in quick succession. His standard approach when he wanted to establish urgency. I kept the phone face down on my lap, focusing instead on the city lights blurring past the window. Each mile between us felt like a breath I hadn't known I needed to take. When we arrived at the hotel, I felt oddly calm. The lobby was modern and unremarkable. Beige walls, generic artwork, soft lighting. No one gave my wine-stained appearance, more than a curious glance as I approached the front desk. "Good evening," the receptionist said, her professional smile faltering slightly as she noticed the state of my clothing. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," I said. "I need a room for tonight, please." Her fingers moved efficiently over the keyboard. "We have a king available on the 7th floor. How many nights?" I hesitated. "Just one for now." I had no plan beyond tonight, no idea what tomorrow would bring. She processed my emergency credit card without comment, handing me a key card in a paper folder. "Room 712. Elevators are to your right. Let us know if you need anything." "Thank you." I turned to go, then paused. "Actually, there is one thing. If anyone calls asking for me, especially a man named Andrew Hayes, I'm not here." Understanding flickered in her eyes. She nodded, making a note in the system. "Of course, ma'am. Your privacy is important to us." The elevator ride to the 7th floor gave me a moment alone with my reflection in the mirrored walls. Wine had dried in streaks down my neck. My carefully applied makeup was smudged, and my hair had fallen from its structured style. I looked like a different person, disheveled, unpredictable, free. Room 712 was standard hotel fare. Queen bed with too many pillows, desk by the window, bathroom with miniature toiletries. I locked the door behind me, sliding the security chain into place, and for the first time since leaving the Richardsons' dining table, I exhaled fully. My phone had accumulated 7 text messages and 3 missed calls from Andrew. I wasn't ready to read them yet. Instead, I peeled off the wine-soaked dress, dropping it in a heap on the bathroom floor. I stepped into the shower, watching as the water ran pink with wine before clearing. As I stood under the hot spray, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. Andrew's stories, the laughter at my expense, the manuscript, my private world invaded and mocked, the wine hitting my face. "You idiot!" But what struck me now, washed clean of the physical evidence, was how predictable it all had been. The public humiliation wasn't a shocking aberration in our marriage. It was merely the most visible manifestation of a pattern that had existed for years. I had been living in a slow-motion crisis for so long that I'd mistaken it for normalcy. Wrapped myself in one of the hotel's rough towels and sat on the edge of the bed. Finally, I picked up my phone. Andrew's messages evolved exactly as I expected. 4:42 p.m. Where are you? This is childish. 7:43 p.m. Everyone's concerned. You're embarrassing both of us. 7:48 p.m. I've apologized to the Richardsons on your behalf. 8:01 p.m. Answer your phone. 8:15 p.m. I'm home. Where are you? 8:32 p.m. This is ridiculous. Come home. 9:07 p.m. If you're not home by morning, we're going to have a serious problem. No apology. No recognition of what he'd done. Just anger that I wasn't following the script. I set the phone down without responding and moved to the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was our house. The showcase home Andrew had selected and I had decorated according to his preferences. The thought of returning to it made my chest tighten. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider what it would mean not to go back. The magnitude of that thought should have terrified me, but instead, it felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. My phone buzzed again. Not Andrew this time, but Melissa Richardson. Just checking you're okay. Things got intense. Let me know if you need anything. I stared at the message, trying to decipher if it was genuine concern or just damage control. Either way, I wasn't ready to respond. I pulled back the hotel covers and slid between the crisp, anonymous sheets. Tomorrow, I would need a plan. Tonight, I just needed distance. Sleep came fitfully, in broken fragments between moments of startling clarity. Each time I woke, I remembered immediately where I was and why. By morning, the hotel room felt like a liminal space, somewhere between my past life and whatever came next. I sat cross-legged on the bed with a notepad from the desk drawer, a cup of mediocre hotel coffee cooling beside me. I began writing, not a plan for the future, but a map of the past. It hadn't always been like this with Andrew. When we first met at a university fundraiser 8 years ago, he had been charming, attentive, almost reverent of my work in the English department. He'd asked thoughtful questions about my dissertation on female autonomy in Victorian literature, listened with genuine interest to my career aspirations. I had been drawn to his confidence, his clarity of purpose, his seeming admiration for my intellect. The shifts came gradually after our wedding, so subtle at first that I questioned my own perceptions. The notepad filled with examples, moments I had buried but never forgotten. 3 months after our wedding, Andrew edited an article. I was submitting to an academic journal, changing so much of my analysis that it no longer reflected my views. When I objected, he said he was helping me sound more credible. 6 months. He suggested I take a part-time position rather than the full-time professorship I'd been working toward. We don't need the money, he'd said, and it will give you more flexibility. For what, he never specified. 1 year. At his office Christmas party, he corrected my retelling of how we met, providing a version that emphasized his pursuit and my reluctance, rather than our mutual intellectual connection. When I mentioned it later, he said my memory was romanticized. 2 years. He began referring to my academic work as my little projects in front of his colleagues. When I published an article in a prestigious journal, he called it impressive for a departmental publication, though it was nationally recognized. 3 years. I stopped sharing my writing with him after he returned a short story with so many red marks it looked wounded. Just being honest, he'd said. You want to improve, don't you? 4 years. When I was considered for a department chair position, he questioned whether I had the temperament for leadership, suggesting I would be happier focusing on teaching. I withdrew my name from consideration. 5 years. I stopped speaking. Up when he told stories about me at dinner parties, stories that increasingly portrayed me as absent-minded, naive, or incompetent. It was easier than facing his cold silence on the car ride home. 6 years. I found myself rehearsing conversations with Andrew before having them, anticipating his objections, preparing my defenses. Even in my own mind, his voice had become the dominant one. 7 years. I kept my novel a secret, writing in stolen moments, hiding the manuscript in encrypted files. It was the only part of myself I had protected from his revisions. Looking at the list, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were reading about someone else's life. But these were my experiences, my compromises, my slow surrender of self, my... Phone buzzed. Andrew again, his 17th message since last night. I still hadn't responded to any of them. The progression was textbook. Anger, then commanding, then attempts at guilt, and now, finally, concern. I'm worried about you. Please just let me know you're safe. For a moment, I almost replied. Then, I noticed the subtle manipulation, not I'm sorry or let's talk about what happened, but a message that positioned him as the concerned husband and me as causing him distress. I set the phone down and returned to my notepad. Below the timeline of our marriage, I began a new list. Practical realities I needed to face. Financial entanglement, joint accounts, mortgage in both names, retirement funds, professional impact. Would colleagues at the college take sides? Would this affect my position? Logistics. Where would I live? What would I take? Legal implications. What would separation or divorce entail? The list was daunting, deliberately so. I recognized Andrew's influence even in my own thinking. These were the practical obstacles he would immediately raise to convince me that leaving was impossible, impractical, irrational. But beneath that list, I wrote a single line: the manuscript. My novel, the one thing I had kept for myself through years of diminishment. The one piece of evidence that I still existed separate from Andrew's definition of me. Whatever happened next, I would not surrender that again. By noon, I knew I couldn't hide in the hotel indefinitely. My emergency card had a limit, and I needed more than the single change of clothing the hotel gift shop could provide. More importantly, I needed evidence, documentation of the life Andrew and I had built, and the one he had slowly dismantled. I waited until 1:30 p.m., when Andrew would be in a client meeting, according to his meticulously maintained shared calendar. Then I ordered another rideshare to our house in Oakwood Heights. The driver, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, glanced at my gift shop sweatpants and t-shirt with mild curiosity. "Going home?" she asked. "In a way," I replied, not quite ready to explain that I was going to what had once been home, but might never feel like home again. During the 20-minute drive, I made mental notes of what I needed. Financial documents, my personal laptop, enough clothing to last at least a week, and most importantly, my external hard drive containing backup copies of my manuscript and notes. Our house looked exactly as it had yesterday morning: imposing colonial facade, perfectly maintained landscaping, the brass door knocker gleaming in the afternoon sun. But now it seemed like a stage set, beautiful but hollow. I used my key with a strange sense of trespassing, half expecting alarms to sound. Inside, everything was immaculate as always. The cleaner must have come this morning, our regular Thursday service that Andrew insisted upon. I moved through the house efficiently, starting upstairs in our bedroom. I grabbed my laptop and charger from my bedside table, then pulled a weekend bag from the closet. I selected clothing methodically, practical items, nothing Andrew had purchased for me, nothing that would trigger specific memories. In the bathroom, I collected my medications and basic toiletries, deliberately leaving behind the expensive skincare products Andrew had insisted I needed. Investment in your appearance, he had called it, as if my natural face required extensive correction. Next, I went to the small home office we shared. Andrew's desk dominated the space, a massive mahogany piece with multiple monitors and organized trays. My desk was smaller, tucked into the corner with less natural light. I opened my bottom drawer, removing the external hard drive hidden beneath hanging files. 4 years of work, my novel, research notes, early drafts of articles, teaching materials I'd developed independently. My intellectual life, preserved despite Andrew's subtle discouragement. As I placed it in my bag, my eyes fell on a manila folder on Andrew's desk labeled E. Hayes Personal. My heart quickened. I knew I should leave it alone, but something compelled me to look inside. The folder contained printouts of my emails from the past 6 months, screenshots of text conversations with colleagues, a copy of my class schedule with notes in Andrew's handwriting, and most disturbingly, printed pages from my manuscript with sections highlighted and annotated in red pen. Derivative. Amateurish. Embarrassingly naive. His criticisms lined the margins of my most personal work. I felt sick, not just from the violation of privacy, but from the realization that this had been happening for months without my knowledge. Andrew hadn't stumbled across my manuscript. He had been monitoring me, collecting evidence of some kind. I took pictures of each page with my phone, then returned the folder exactly as I'd found it. This, too, was evidence, not just of yesterday's public humiliation, but of the private dismantling of my autonomy that had preceded it. Downstairs, I located our financial documents in Andrew's home filing system: tax returns, investment statements, mortgage paperwork, insurance policies. I didn't take the originals, but photographed each one, creating a digital record. As I worked, I noticed something disquieting: how little of myself existed in this house. There were no photos of my family, no books I had selected, no artwork that reflected my taste. Even my academic achievements, my dissertation, published articles, teaching awards, were nowhere to be seen. I had been methodically erased. Last stop was the kitchen. I opened the junk drawer and found the spare key to my campus office. Andrew had borrowed my main key months ago and never returned it. Another small control I had accepted without challenge. As I zipped my bag closed, I noticed the blinking light on our home security panel. The system had been logging my movements since I entered. Andrew would know exactly when I had come and gone, what I had done. I left without looking back, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. I checked into a different hotel that afternoon, smaller, farther from our neighborhood, less likely to appear on Andrew's credit card radar. Using cash from an ATM withdrawal, I paid for 3 nights up front. The room was basic but clean, with a small desk by the window where I could work. The first thing I did was connect my external hard drive to my laptop. Seeing my manuscript files intact brought an immense sense of relief, like finding a piece of myself I'd feared lost. I opened the document and read the first chapter, trying to see it through my own eyes rather than imagining Andrew's critical margin notes. It was good. Not perfect, but genuinely good. The story of a woman in the 1920s who reinvents herself after scandal, a narrative I now recognized as my subconscious processing my own trapped circumstances. My phone buzzed again. 23 messages from Andrew now, escalating in urgency. The latest: coming home to find clothes missing. What exactly do you think you're doing? This is childish and irresponsible. For the first time, I typed a response. I'm safe. I need space. Please don't contact me for 24 hours. His reply came immediately. This is unacceptable. Tell me where you are now. I turned off my phone and set it aside. On the hotel notepad, I began making lists, methodical, practical lists that would help me see through the fog of confusion Andrew had so carefully cultivated. Financial assets. My personal savings account from before marriage. $4,086 emergency credit card. $9 to $82 available credit. My portion of joint. Checking account, approximately 34,000 retirement account in my name, 62,500 potential. Half of house equity, unknown. Monthly income, expenses, my salary from community college, 3,850 month rent for a one-bedroom apartment. What 400 a month, utilities, insurance, phone. 550 a month car payment. 325 a month basic living expenses. 800 a month the EI. Numbers were clarifying. Not comfortable, but survivable. I could afford to leave. I had always been able to afford to leave, despite Andrew's careful implications that I was financially dependent on him. I opened my laptop again and created a new document titled Evidence. Into it, I began compiling a chronological record, screenshots of Andrew's text messages, particularly those that were commanding or manipulative photos of the folder I'd found, with his surveillance of my activities notes about specific incidents of public humiliation, with dates and witnesses, a detailed account of the wine incident while it was still fresh in my memory, including exact quotes. I wasn't sure if I would need this documentation legally, professionally, or personally, but creating it helped transform painful memories into objective facts, evidence rather than emotion. As evening fell, I ordered room service and spread my materials across the bed. The events of the past 24 hours had created a strange clarity, like a fever breaking after a long illness. For the first time in years, I was thinking without Andrew's voice in my head, evaluating options based on my own well-being rather than his expectations. I recognized that I was at a crossroads. I could return home, accept Andrew's inevitably crafted apology, and continue in a marriage that was slowly erasing me. He would be contrite for a while, bringing flowers, speaking softly, making small concessions. Then, gradually, we would return to our established patterns. Each cycle would leave me with less of myself intact, or I could leave. Actually leave. Not just for a few nights in a hotel, but permanently. I could file for divorce, find my own apartment, reclaim my career aspirations, finish my novel. I could rebuild a life centered on my own voice rather than the systematic silencing of it. The prospect was terrifying. Andrew would not make it easy. He would use every tool at his disposal: financial, leverage, social connections, emotional manipulation, to maintain control. He would cast me as irrational, unstable, ungrateful. Some people would believe him. I took a deep breath and looked again at the manuscript on my screen, at the woman on the page who had found the courage to rebuild after devastation. I had created her. Perhaps I could learn from her. I picked up my phone and turned it on. 36 messages now. I ignored them and instead opened my contacts, scrolling until I found the name I was looking for. Catherine Winters, a family law attorney who had guest lectured in one of my classes last year on literature and legal narrative. My finger hovered over her number. This would be a step I couldn't easily reverse. Once I reached out to a lawyer, I would be acknowledging what I had been avoiding for years. My marriage was not just flawed, but fundamentally damaging. I pressed the call button before I could talk myself out of it. Catherine Winters' office. A receptionist answered. "Hello," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My name is Eliza Hayes. I need to schedule a consultation about divorce proceedings." The word divorce hung in the air, concrete, irrevocable, liberating. "I have an appointment available tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Would that work for you, Ms. Hayes?" "Yes," I said. "That would be perfect." I ended the call and felt something shift inside me. Fear, yes, but beneath it, the solid foundation of a decision, finally made. After scheduling the consultation with Catherine Winters, I slept better than I had in months. I woke before my alarm, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. Whatever happened today would set the course for everything that followed. I dressed carefully in clothes I'd grabbed from home: a navy blazer, gray slacks, and a white blouse. Professional, composed, the outfit of someone making rational decisions, not emotional reactions. Andrew had always emphasized appearances. Today, I would use that lesson for myself. At 9:15, I arrived at Catherine Winter's office, a modest suite in a downtown building. The reception area was warm and understated, with none of the intimidating grandeur of Andrew's firm. "Ms. Hayes," Catherine greeted me, extending her hand. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. "Please come in." Her office was lined with bookshelves, legal texts interspersed with literature. I recognized several novels I taught in my classes. "Before we begin," she said, settling behind her desk, "I want to be clear that this consultation doesn't commit you to any course of action. We're here to discuss options." I nodded, grateful for her approach. "Now tell me what's brought you here today." I had rehearsed this on the drive over, preparing a clinical, unemotional summary. But when I opened my mouth, the story came out differently, more honest than I'd intended. 2 nights ago, my husband threw wine in my face at a dinner party and called me an idiot in front of his colleagues. But that's not really why I'm here. I'm here because I realized that moment was just the most visible part of a pattern that's been destroying me for years. Catherine's expression remained professionally neutral, but her eyes reflected understanding. She listened without interruption as I outlined the progression of my marriage, the gradual erosion of my autonomy, the constant undermining of my confidence and career. When I finished, she clasped her hands on her desk. "Thank you for your honesty. What you're describing follows patterns I've seen many times. It's a form of emotional abuse." Hearing the term spoken so directly, emotional abuse, sent a shock through me. I had avoided labeling it, even in my own mind. "I've brought documentation," I said, passing her a flash drive with copies of everything I'd compiled. Text messages, emails, financial records, and an account of specific incidents. She nodded approvingly. "This is excellent. Most clients come in with far less organized information." She paused. "Has there been any physical abuse beyond the wine incident?" "No," I said. "Andrew is too careful for that. His methods are more subtle." "I understand. Now let's discuss your immediate concerns and then develop a strategy." Over the next hour, Catherine helped me map out concrete next steps. My priorities were clear: financial security, physical safety, professional stability, and protection of my personal work. "First, we need to secure your finances," she said. "Based on what you've shared, I'm concerned your husband might restrict your access to joint accounts once he realizes you're serious about leaving." She recommended immediately transferring half of our joint account to a new account in my name only at a different bank. She also advised me to collect all important documents: birth certificate, social security card, insurance information, and store them securely away from home. "What about the house?" I asked. "It's marital property, so you're entitled to your share of the equity. But I don't recommend staying there during this process. Do you have somewhere else to go?" I thought of my sister in Chicago, my college friend in Boston. But leaving town would mean abandoning my teaching position mid-semester, disrupting the one part of my life that was truly mine. "I could rent an apartment locally," I said. "I have enough for a security deposit and first month's rent from my personal savings." Catherine nodded. "Good. I also suggest you inform your department chair about your situation. Not all the details, but enough that they understand you're going through a personal challenge and might need some flexibility." The thought of telling Dr. Martinez about my marital problems made me uncomfortable, but I recognized the wisdom in Catherine's advice. Andrew had connections at the college. I needed allies. "What about my manuscript?" I asked. "My novel. Andrew's read it without my permission, made notes on it. I'm worried about what he might do with it." Catherine frowned. "Intellectual property. In marriage can be complicated, but your creative work is yours. I recommend registering copyright immediately as an added protection. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear action plan: secure finances by transferring half of joint funds, find temporary housing away from our shared home, collect important documents and personal items, register copyright for my manuscript, speak with my department chair, change passwords on all accounts, prepare for Andrew's potential reactions. As Catherine walked me to the door, she paused. Eliza, leaving a controlling relationship takes exceptional courage. The coming weeks will be challenging. But remember, you're not reclaiming your life. You're recognizing that it was always yours. I left her office with a folder of information and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My phone showed 7 new messages from Andrew, escalating from concern to anger to threats. His latest text read, "If you don't contact me by 5 p.m., I'm filing a missing person report." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the bank to make the first move in our new, unspoken game. For the first time, I wasn't playing by Andrew's rules. I left the bank with a new account, half of our joint funds, and a strange sense of disbelief at how simple it had been. I'd been prepared for questions, resistance, perhaps even a call to Andrew for verification. Instead, the banker had efficiently processed my request, treating me like any other competent adult managing their finances. It was early afternoon when I arrived at the community college where I taught. Thursday was my light day. No classes, just office hours from 2 to 4 p.m. Perfect timing to speak with Dr. Martinez before students arrived. The familiar academic environment felt grounding after the upheaval of the past 48 hours. My small office, with its overflowing bookshelves and student papers stacked in neat piles, represented the part of myself I'd managed to preserve despite Andrew's subtle discouragement. Dr. Martinez was in her office, door open as usual. She looked up from her computer and smiled. "Eliza, this is a surprise. I thought you weren't in until later. Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. "There's something personal I need to discuss." Her expression grew concerned as she gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course, I had rehearsed this conversation, planning to keep it professional and vague. But sitting across from Dr. Martinez, who had mentored me, championed my teaching, encouraged me to pursue department leadership despite my hesitation, I found myself unable to maintain the carefully constructed facade. "I'm leaving my husband," I said simply. "It's become untenable. I've consulted an attorney, and I'm taking steps to establish independence. But I wanted you to know because there might be some disruption." Dr. Martinez's face registered surprise, then understanding. "I see," she said, quietly. "Is there anything specific you're concerned about regarding your position here?" I took a deep breath. "Andrew has connections with the board of trustees. We attend college functions together. I'm worried he might try to complicate things for me professionally." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. It helps to know what might be coming." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've known you for 5 years, Eliza. You're one of our most dedicated faculty members. Whatever personal challenges you're facing, your position here is secure." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. I'll do everything possible to ensure this doesn't affect my teaching." "Your classes are important," she said, "but so are you. If you need accommodations, schedule adjustments, temporary reduction in committee work, just ask." I thanked her again and returned to my office, feeling lighter. One more crucial foundation secured. I had just settled at my desk when my office phone rang. The caller ID showed our home number, Andrew. My hand hovered over the receiver as it continued, ringing. He knew my schedule. He knew I had office hours today. This wasn't a coincidence. I let it ring until voicemail picked up, then turned my attention to my computer. I needed to change passwords, email, social media, cloud storage, everything Andrew might access. My office phone rang again, and again. After the 4th call, my cell phone buzzed with a text. "I know you're in your office. Pick up the phone, Eliza." My heart raced. How did he know I was here? My first class wasn't for another hour. Then I remembered. the location tracking app he'd insisted we both install for safety. I quickly checked my phone settings and disabled it, then returned to changing passwords. 20 minutes later, as I was preparing for my Victorian literature seminar, a delivery person appeared at my office door with an enormous bouquet of roses. Andrew's standard apology gesture. "Dr. Hayes?" the delivery person asked. I nodded, accepting the arrangement. Mechanically. After they left, I opened the small card. "This has gone far enough. We need to talk. I'll be waiting at home tonight." The message was classic Andrew. No apology, just the expectation of compliance wrapped in the superficial gesture of flowers. Placed the bouquet on the corner of my desk, feeling nothing. In the past, this would have been the beginning of our reconciliation ritual. I would return home. Andrew would express regret, though never quite apologize. I would accept my partial responsibility for provoking him, and we would return to our carefully choreographed life until the next incident. But as I looked at the roses, specifically chosen to be visible to anyone passing my office, a public display of apparent devotion, I felt only clarity. This wasn't love. It was strategy, and for the first time, I wasn't following the script. My Victorian literature seminar that afternoon focused on Jane Eyre, specifically the scene where Jane confronts Rochester after discovering his deception. I'd taught this text dozens of times, but today the words resonated differently. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will. I looked at my students, bright, engaged young people discussing female agency in 19th century literature, and felt a profound disconnect between what I taught and how I lived. How had I spent years analyzing the psychological imprisonment of fictional women while ignoring my own? After class, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Andrew and a voicemail. "Eliza, this has gone beyond ridiculous. I spoke with Dr. Martinez about your stress levels recently. She seems quite concerned. I'll be at your office by 6. We're going home to discuss this like adults." My blood ran cold. He had contacted my department chair, exactly what I'd been trying to prevent. By speaking with her first, I immediately called Dr. Martinez. "He did call," she confirmed, "claiming you've been under tremendous stress and having emotional difficulties. He suggested you might need a leave of absence." "And what did you tell him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "That personnel matters are confidential, and that from my observation, you're performing your duties excellently." Her tone softened. "Eliza, this call clarified some things for me. Please know you have my full support." Relief and gratitude flooded through me. "Thank you. He mentioned coming to my office at 6. I'd prefer not to see him right now." "Use my private exit," she said without hesitation. "It leads directly to the faculty parking area. I'll have campus security monitor your office until closing." This immediate, practical support from someone I respected felt like standing on solid ground after years of shifting sand. As I gathered my materials, a knock at my door made me freeze. It was too early for Andrew, but my nerves were raw. "Dr. Hayes?" a hesitant voice called. I opened the door to find Zoe Patel, one of my most promising students. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, clutching a folder, "but I wanted to ask about the department's summer research program. The deadline is tomorrow." I gestured for her to enter, grateful for this normal academic interaction. "The Victorian Women Writers Project?" I clarified. "Are you applying for the student researcher position?" She nodded eagerly. "Yes, but Professor Landon just announced he's taking sabbatical next year. Since you specialize in Victorian literature, I wondered if you might be supervising instead." I blinked, processing this information. David Landon had been coordinating the summer research program for years, a prestigious position that included a stipend and reduced teaching load for the supervising professor. "I haven't heard anything official about that," I said, Oh, Zoe looked embarrassed. Maybe I misunderstood. He mentioned your name specifically when he told us about his sabbatical. After Zoe left, I immediately emailed Dr. Martinez. Her response came within minutes. I was going to discuss this with you next week. With David taking sabbatical, we need someone to lead the Victorian Women Writers Project. Your name is at the top of our list. It would mean supervising 3 undergraduate researchers, a summer stipend of $8,000, and a reduced course load in the fall. Would you be interested? I stared at the screen, momentarily stunned. This was exactly the kind of academic opportunity I had stopped pursuing years ago after Andrew had subtly discouraged my professional advancement. Wouldn't it be nice to have more time at home? He'd suggested when a similar opportunity arose 3 years earlier. These administrative roles just lead to stress and politics. Your teaching is where you really shine. I'd withdrawn my name, then interpreting his discouragement as concern for my well-being. Now I recognized it for what it was, a deliberate limiting of my independence. I replied to Dr. Martinez immediately. I'm very interested. Thank you for considering me, Turkar. Response came back with details about the formal application, due next Wednesday. A week from now, I could have not just financial independence through my own bank account, but enhanced professional standing and opportunity. The timing felt significant, almost as if the universe were confirming my decision to leave Andrew by immediately opening doors he had helped close. I packed my bags quickly, taking Dr. Martinez's private exit as suggested. As I drove away from campus, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw Andrew's BMW pulling into the faculty lot. For the first time, I was a step ahead of him. At my hotel, I spent the evening working on my application for the research director position, pouring my academic knowledge and teaching philosophy into each section. This wasn't just about career advancement anymore. It was about reclaiming my professional identity. Around 9, my phone rang again. Andrew, calling from his cell. I silenced it, but noticed he'd left another voicemail. Campus security wouldn't let me into your office building after hours. What exactly have you told people, Eliza? This ends now. I'm filing a missing person report first thing tomorrow if you don't come home tonight. This isn't just embarrassing. It's concerning everyone. Who cares about you? The threat was clear, wrapped in concern. But it no longer worked on me. I knew exactly what I was doing, and more importantly, who I was becoming. Someone who would never again be diminished by the man who had promised to cherish her. The missing person report never materialized. Andrew was too calculated for that. He knew such a report would create an official record, questions from authorities, potential publicity. He preferred to keep his methods private, controllable. By Saturday morning, I had submitted my application for the research director position, met with a real estate agent about short-term apartment rentals, and registered the copyright for my manuscript. Each step strengthened my resolve. When my phone rang that afternoon showing Andrew's number, I finally answered. Where are you? His voice was tightly controlled, the reasonable tone he used when most dangerous. Somewhere safe, I replied, maintaining my own composure. This has gone far enough, Eliza. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. We can talk, but not at home, I said, and not alone. A pause. What exactly does that mean? It means, I'll meet you in a public place, the coffee shop at the Bridgeview Hotel at 4 this afternoon. He scoffed. A public meeting? Like we're diplomats? This is our marriage. Those are my terms, Andrew. Another pause, longer this time. Fine. 4 o'clock. I arrived early, selecting a table with clear sightlines to both exits. I ordered tea I didn't want, just to have something to do with my hands. Andrew arrived precisely at 4, impeccably dressed in casual weekend attire that I knew he'd selected carefully. Image management, even now. He sat across from me, his expression a practiced mix of concern and restrained irritation. Well, are you satisfied with this little drama you've created? I met his gaze steadily. This isn't drama, Andrew. This is me leaving a marriage that has become destructive. His eyes narrowed slightly. Destructive? Because of one incident at dinner? I admit I was out of line, but it wasn't one incident, I interrupted. It's been years of subtle undermining, public humiliation, control, and isolation. That's absurd, he said, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. He hadn't expected this clarity, this direct naming of his methods. I've consulted an attorney, I continued. I've secured my finances. I've found alternate housing. I'm filing for divorce. He stared at me, his facade cracking slightly. You took money from our account. Half of our joint funds, yes. Legally. Mine. His jaw tightened. And you told your department chair some story that got campus security called on me? I told her the truth, that I'm leaving my husband and concerned about professional repercussions. For a moment, raw anger flashed across his face, the unfiltered reaction I'd glimpsed when he threw the wine. Then, like a mask sliding back into place, his expression shifted to wounded confusion. I don't understand what's happened to you. Eliza, this isn't like you. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. This is exactly like me. The real me. The person who's been disappearing piece by piece in our marriage. He leaned forward, voice lowering. If this is about your writing, I was only trying to help. You have potential, but you need guidance. No, Andrew. What I needed was support. What I got was sabotage. His expression hardened. So that's it? 7 years of marriage and you're walking away over hurt feelings? No, I'm walking away because I finally recognize that this relationship is fundamentally unequal. You don't want a partner, Andrew. You want someone you can control. He glanced around, aware of nearby patrons who might overhear. Image maintenance, even now. You're not thinking clearly, he said, lowering his voice further. Let's go somewhere private and really talk this through. I shook my head. I've said what I came to say. My attorney will contact you next week regarding divorce proceedings. Andrew's hand shot across the table, gripping my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to demonstrate control. This isn't over, Eliza. Before I could respond, a voice interrupted from beside our table. Is everything all right here? I looked up to see Thomas Richardson, the managing partner from Andrew's firm and host of the dinner party where this had all begun. He was standing with his wife, concern evident in their expressions. Andrew immediately released my wrist, his public face sliding seamlessly back into place. Thomas, Cynthia, just a private discussion with my wife. Eliza, Cynthia said, her eyes meeting mine with unexpected warmth. How are you? The simple question, asked with genuine concern, caught me off guard. I had always seen Cynthia as just another fixture in Andrew's professional orbit, someone who tolerated me but never really saw me. I'm doing what needs to be done, I answered honestly. Something in my tone must have communicated more than my words. Cynthia nodded slightly, then turned to Andrew. We heard about what happened at Victor's dinner. That was concerning. Behavior, Andrew. The color drained from Andrew's face. His entire professional identity was built on control, composure, reasonableness. Having his behavior labeled concerning by the wife of his firm's managing partner was devastating. There's been a misunderstanding, he began, but Thomas cut him off. I don't think so, he said quietly. Several people witnessed it. We've always valued professionalism at the firm, both in and out of the office. The implication was clear. Andrew's actions had consequences beyond our marriage. Thomas, I can explain, Andrew started. Monday, my office, 9 a.m., Thomas replied, his tone final. He turned to me. Eliza, can we help you with anything? The offer was unexpected. A hand extended across the chasm of professional hierarchies and social circles. For a moment, I saw how differently things might have been if I'd had allies all along. "Thank you, but I'm managing," I said, finding strength in stating this truth aloud. They nodded and moved on to their table, leaving Andrew and me in a charged silence. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. For the first time, Andrew was experiencing public consequences for his behavior. "This is your doing," he hissed, once they were out of earshot. "No, Andrew, this is your doing. Your choices. Your actions. I'm just finally refusing to cover for them." I stood, gathering my purse. "Goodbye, Andrew." As I walked away, I felt his eyes on me, burning with the realization that the narrative was no longer his to control. 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment, morning light streaming through windows I had dressed with curtains of my own choosing. The divorce proceedings were underway, not simple, but progressing steadily with Catherine's skilled guidance. Andrew had fought initially, then shifted to negotiation when he realized his professional reputation was at stake. My desk sat a letter from the English department, confirming my appointment as director of the Victorian Women Writers Research Program. Beside it was my manuscript, now complete at 347 pages, ready to send to literary agents. The wine stain had long since washed out of my blouse, but the memory remained vivid, not as a wound, but as a watershed moment. The public humiliation that had seemed devastating had actually been liberation in disguise. My phone chimed with a text from Dr. Martinez. "Committee loved your proposal for the new women's literature course. Approved for spring semester?" I smiled, remembering how I'd once talked myself out of proposing that very course, hearing Andrew's voice in my head. "The department already has enough specialty offerings. Focus on the core curriculum where you're needed." The truest victory wasn't in the logistics of separation, the divided assets, the new apartment, the professional opportunities. It wasn't even in the moments when Andrew finally realized he couldn't regain control, couldn't manipulate me back into the role I'd played for 7 years. The real triumph was internal. The quiet morning moments when I made decisions without hearing his critical voice in my head. The gradual return of my natural laugh, not the careful, measured one I'd developed to avoid seeming too much. The rediscovery of preferences and opinions I'd buried to keep peace. Freedom, I was learning, wasn't just about escaping something destructive. It was about creating something authentic in its place. Not a perfect life, but finally, truly, my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.